Hi everyone, my name's Mrs. Banham and I'm the reading specialist teacher at Glenfroom Primary School. I mainly work with Year 1 and Year 2 children. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how we teach reading in school and how you can help support your child at home. So I'll just start the PowerPoint. Okay, so the aims of this session are to understand the importance of reading. Think about how you can make it fun at home. Find out about how we teach the letter shapes, which we call graphemes. To understand about phonics teaching. To learn about our tricky words. How we introduce a book to a child before they read. Find out about the basic reading skills and prompts that you can use. How we learn about we're going to learn about the reading books and how to record reading. And also we're going to have a little bit of a look at the progress that we expect children to make in reception. Reading is a really important skill, and we've got some quotes here that just explain how vital it is that children learn to read. Preschool children who read books with their parents at home are more likely to do well in all areas of school. Children who read achieve better results in all areas of the curriculum, and if you want your child to be successful at school, encourage him or her to read. It really is a really important skill for you to help your child to learn. Interestingly, children who just choose to read do better. We call this reading for pleasure. There's evidence here that it suggests that reading for pleasure is more likely to determine whether a child does well at school than social or economic background. So basically, children who just choose to read, no matter what their background, they basically do better in school than children who don't. And children who read for pleasure are likely to do significantly better at school than their peers. So thinking about this, how can you as parents encourage your children to want to read for pleasure? Well, parents are one of the most important literacy teachers. The reasons for that are because you're there to provide a great example to your children. They need to see you reading, see you having books around at home and enjoying books. And they also need you to help them to value reading when they're doing it at home themselves. Children are more likely to continue being readers in homes where books and reading are valued. So it just goes to show how important that is. Parents and the home environment are essential to the early teaching of reading and the fostering of a love of reading. So the more you can do to encourage your children to want to read, the more likely they are to become readers and just enjoy having that pleasure for reading. And that can help them in all areas of the curriculum. How can we make reading fun? So there's a few things you can think about that you can do to help make it a fun activity. When you're reading together, make it a fun, cozy time where you snuggle up, all your focus is on the book and you're just enjoying that time with your child. You do need to choose a good time. And think about when this would be that suits you and your family. It might be before school. It might be sat in the car whilst you're waiting to go into school. I know that I used to do that with my children. There are no other distractions. It might be after school, it might be after your evening meal, or it might be bedtime. But you need to find a good time for you and your child, and you need to make that part of your daily routine so that they expect it to happen, that you try and focus that it's something that happens every day. No distractions. I would try to keep away from the television, obviously, away from toys, have the focus all on looking at the book, so that nothing distracts your child at that time. Enjoy sharing the book together. Try and have favourite books, talk about the books, talk about the characters, make it a lovely fun time where you both look at the pictures, listen to stories, find out about things, lots of poetry, songs and rhymes, just make it a fun time. Singing songs and rhymes are really good to help literacy development, and it helps your child to hear sounds in words. It also helps have fun with words, and it's also a great fun thing to do whilst looking at books. Home languages are very important, and we really encourage you to carry on talking, reading and sharing books in home languages as well. It's really valuable that children hear a language that's spoken fluently. So please do carry on talking in home languages and reading in home languages too. So how do we start teaching in school? We start looking at the letter shapes, which we call graphemes, at the same time as we start to teach the sounds. The picture here shows the read, write, ink method that we use for teaching the graphemes. And each sound has a little patter that the teachers say in order to help the children remember the correct way to write the letters. We always start with the lowercase letters and not the capitals. So it's a really good thing if you can help practice that at home. So each letter has a little sentence, story that goes with it to help remember. So around the apple and down the leaf for A, down the laces to the heel and round the toe for B. And this is something which will be repeated in school to help them remember how to form the letter shapes. And whilst they're doing this, they'll also be learning the sounds that the letters make. So we're going to have a look at that now. There's one thing that I always recommend that you try not to do, and that's to add an sound to the end of the sounds when you're saying them. For example, we say B and not ba. If you're adding the sound to the end, it can really cause a problem for the children when they're writing and when they're reading too. Because if you say ka and ta, then when you read a word like cat and you're saying the sounds ka, a, ta, when you put it together, it sounds like kaata. So the correct pronunciation of sounds is to keep them very short and to not add the sound to the end. So it would sound like this. K, a, t. So what I'm going to do next is to just go through the sounds so that you can hear the correct way to say them. And then maybe you could pause it afterwards and have a go yourself. Normally, when we're in the meeting, we all have a go at this together. So maybe you'd like to have a go afterwards. Okay, so off I go. A, B, K, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, A, V, W, X, Y, Z. So it takes a bit of practice doing that, and sometimes you want to say the letters louder, ha, than you should do because it needs to be ha. But if you can try and help your children by learning them in this way, it will really help them. If you get stuck and you can't think exactly how to pronounce that sound, one of the good things you can do is just to think of a word that starts with that sound and then go to say the word and then stop. So if you were trying to think, how do I say the sound v to my child, think of a word like van and then go to say van, but just stop as soon as you said the first sound. V. So water, ooh, yellow, ye, queen, coo, and the sound that X makes, it is just like on the end of the word box. So the sound is X. Now in school we use Jolly Phonics to help teach children sounds, and each sound has a story and an action, and the action helps the child to learn that sound. It's just something else that helps it stick in their mind and help them remember it. So here's an example here for A. There's a story of a picnic and there are ants, and then there's a song, and basically we're teaching the children that A is the sound that this letter shape makes, this grapheme makes. So each letter has a story that focuses clearly on this sound and how it is made, and then we learn an action for each one. You will have a set of these sent home. We don't teach the sounds in the order of the alphabet. We teach them in a special order that has been chosen for different reasons. We often leave the trickier sounds till the end, and the first few sounds are in a group that if you wanted to make some nice simple words like sat, at, in, pin, tip, tap, there's lots of simple words that you can make there with those sounds. So that's the reason that we teach them in this order. You can also see here that some of the actions that we use as we're teaching. So the first one shows you that you weave your hand in an S shape like a snake and you say S. And the second one for A, you wiggle your fingers below your elbow as if ants are crawling on you and you say A, A, A. Now, as we go through these sounds, you'll see this first group are all single phonemes. Then we move on to the second group and the third group. And then we come to some sounds that have two letters representing one sound. So they start to move on to some sounds that are more complicated, like A and O and I and E and OR. And then finally, they come to some more of the challenging sounds, the sounds that are a bit harder to remember. So this just shows you the order of the 7 different groups of sounds that they will learn. Okay, so we also then use these to make to read words in class. We use these sounds when we're playing games. We also put them in sentences. So we might look at a group of words that all start with the sound ch, and read these and write these and play games and put them into sentences. So this again shows you some more of those trickier ones that we will learn after we start with the basic single phonemes like s, a, t, p, I, n. When we're teaching phonics, we also try and teach the children the 2 skills of blending and segmenting. Now, blending involves the children saying the sounds and then smoothing them together or stretching them together so that they can hear the word. And this is something they need to practice. So if you were reading the word man, you would need to start by saying the single sounds, ah, n, and then you need to learn how to blend them together. Man, man. And that activity of stretching them and blending the sounds together helps the children to hear the word. So that's how we teach the children to blend sounds. And now the reverse of that is called segmenting. So if you were looking at the word cat and you wanted to take the word cat into separate sounds, maybe if you were trying to write the word cat, then you'd say cat, k, at, and you're taking the word apart, and that is called segmenting. So some good ways to practice doing some blending and segmenting would be to have some little word cards with some nice simple words on for them to practice. You can use magnetic letters. I use those a lot in my teaching. You can use dice, you can use letter cards, and just practice saying those sounds and blending them together. Or you could tell them the word. This is the word box. Can you tell me the sounds that you hear in the word box? The ox, and you can practice taking them apart. Now, some helpful websites if you're wanting to have some help with phonics. We use the Jolly Phonics website and their resources, so you could have a look at that. And also, Mr. Thorne does phonics. He is fantastic at showing you how to do it if you need some help. So there's on his website, it shows you how to learn the letters and the sounds of the alphabet, and he goes through the whole alphabet, which is handy for you to hear. But he also has little videos about each of the sounds, and I think they're really worth watching too. Okay, moving on. Tricky words. Tricky words are words that you can't generally sound out. They're words that are best learnt as a whole word on a flashcard. So children do need to practice using their phonics and sounding out words, but there's another skill where sometimes they just need to know some of the words too. They're often words that are used quite often, quite common words in books, and there's some examples of those on the screen now. In school, we have them on some picture shapes of animals and transport, and we tend to teach them in groups. Your child will bring them home in some little booklets like these. You can take them apart, you could practice them as flashcards, you could play games with them, you can hide them around the room and see if they can find them. Oh, which word have you found? Is it the or is it and? Can you read it to me? And often just practice putting them down on the table, saying them quickly, and doing that each day alongside when you're doing your reading book is really good practice to help them learn to say some words instantly as soon as you put them down. Initially, they might want to try sounding them out, but for most of these words, you can't do that very easily, or you can't do it at all. You just need to know them, and children need to know that some words you can sound out, some words you can't sound out. You just need to know them. So you can play games, you can have a quick daily practice, you can play a game like My Pile, Your Pile, where you put the words down. If they say them quickly, they go on their pile. If you have to help them with the word, you put them on your pile. I let them have a go and win them back at the end if they can. You could play bingo with these words. You could get some paper out, draw some squares, and write these words onto some bingo cards. You could hide them, see if you can find them. Can you read them to me when you find them? And you can also look for them in books. Now, introducing a book to a child. Before reading, you always want to talk about the book first. I always read the title to the child, and I always look at the pictures, and I always tell them any names that they're going to be reading in the book, mainly because names are quite tricky to read. So I always go through these first. So if I was introducing a book like this book, I would say something like this. Okay, so today we're going to be reading this book. It's called Jack and Billy. I wonder what Jack and Billy are doing. What can you see in the picture? Yes, there's some boxes. Let's see what's happening. I wonder if they're going to make something with boxes. What do you think Jack's doing? He's got some paint there. I wonder what he's painting. What do you think he could be making that into? Yes, it's a car. Have you ever made anything with a box? Have we ever had a box at home that we've made into something? Here's Jack. He's sat in his car now, and he's going brum brum. Can you do that? Brum brum. Here comes his brother Billy, and Jack wants him to get into the car, but Billy doesn't want to. He's feeling a bit sad. I think he wants his own car. Now what's Jack showing him here? Who do you think this other person in the picture is? I think that might be Dad. Now look, they're both making a car. And there they are in the end. Can you remember the sound that they were making in their car? Brum, brum. Afterwards, we always talk about the book at the end after they've read it. But you can just see there how I would introduce the book. I try and use as many of the words in my discussion. I try and talk about things that they've done at home that are similar experiences to those in the book. And as you can see, you give them all that language before they start to read. And then you would ask them to read the book. At the end, then we might say, I might ask them some questions about the book. Who had a car first? How do you think Billy felt? Where did they get the boxes from? What do you think could have been in those boxes before Dad had them? If you had a box, what would you make it into? So asking them lots of questions, especially questions that the answers are in the book, such as what colour did Billy paint his car? But also ask them questions where the answer is not there and they have to think about it themselves. So what would you make a box into? Could be a good question where they have to think about their own opinion, their own ideas. Early reading skills. Now, when we start teaching children to read, there are lots of skills which we have to demonstrate to them and show them. These sheets that you have explain the skills in child terminology, so they can understand what they need to do and how they need to do it when they're reading. So they need to understand that when you read, it needs to make sense. They need to be able to point to the words. They need to understand that the picture is there to help them. They do need to learn to read smoothly, so it sounds like talking, and not read it like that. We don't want them to sound robotic, so we try and encourage them to say, can you say it smoothly, like talking? The next one says, I can get my mouth ready to say the first sound. So if they're stuck on a new word, the best thing to encourage them to do is make sure they make the shape of the next sound, of the first sound of the word with their mouth. So if they were reading a story just like the last one, and Billy was making a car, and Billy was saying, look at my car, and they were stuck on the word car, you would expect them to say, look at my and to get their mouth ready for that first sound. And that helps them to think about what could make sense, what could the word be, could they use the sounds and sound it out. So it's really useful to say, can you get your mouth ready for the first sound? So that the other thing is, if they said something like, look at my bus, you could say to them, oh, did you get your mouth ready for the first sound then? So you're trying to encourage them to do that, because they must know that the writing on the page needs to match the things that they're saying. Okay, on to the next one. I can instantly recall simple words. So this is when the tricky words are coming into our reading. They need to know their tricky words. I sometimes call these keywords. Nowadays we call them tricky words in school. They need to know what a full stop is for, and that they need to change their voice. They need to know that they can, when they're sounding out a word, saying the sounds, we call that sounding out, that they can put their finger under the sounds to help them. They need to be able to blend sounds. They do need to know what speech marks are for, and this is something you might need to talk to them about, that those marks on the page are showing them that somebody's talking. If they have bold print on the page, they need to know that they need to be a bit louder. They also need to know when they see an exclamation mark, how to change their voice. So I often show them that with, such as in the sentence below where it says, look, come on, Sam. So they need to know that those exclamation marks change how we read, and that we need to say it with a bit of surprise or a bit louder. So expression is important. And as soon as we start reading level 3 books, you'll see speech marks and exclamation marks. So demonstrate how to read in that way and what to do when they see those straight away. They need to listen to their reading and make sure that if it doesn't make sense, they go back. Part of reading is to be able to monitor it and make sure that what you're reading makes sense. So encourage them to do that. Oh, I've just realised there's one there that's repeated. The one at the bottom, when you see a word and it doesn't look right, you need to encourage the child to start correcting it themselves. So they might be able to notice that something isn't right and then correct it. Can they use their finger to break words into pieces? That's something that comes into level 3 and 4 books. So they come across words such as into, or today, or away. So they need to know that words can be broken up into pieces or syllables. And this is something we work on in school. So you can see in the next one as well, to use my finger to break words into syllables and known words. Changing their voice when they see a question mark. Reading smoothly with good intonation and expression and without pointing to the text. Sorry, I just moved it on a bit quick then. I think once they are confident at using their finger to point to words, once they know why they're doing that and they're focusing on their reading and they don't need their finger anymore, they don't need to point. Some children point at words for a very long time and they really don't need to. All we're doing is training them to use that finger initially so that they know that the words need to match, the finger needs to point and the words need to match those on the page. As soon as they're able to do that independently without a finger, then we want them to stop doing that. It generally, I'd say, around level 5 or 6, but a lot of children earlier than that. So if your child is confidently reading maybe a level 3 or 4 and you feel they don't really need their finger, encourage them to stop using it. And there's some prompts on this page that I will talk about now to help you do that. So early reading prompts. Now, these are really useful, and these are things that I say over and over again as children are learning to read. When a child is stuck, give them time, first of all, to work it out. Try not to jump in and tell them the word that they're stuck on. But here are also some prompts that you can say to encourage them to try the right thing, or to encourage them to think about their reading so that they can monitor their reading themselves. So the first prompt that we use an awful lot with reception children is that we want them to read it with their finger. We want them to point to the words. So we ask them to read it with their finger. One I mentioned before, get your mouth ready for the first sound. So that's a prompt that we use when they're reading. If they're stuck, oh, can you get your mouth ready for the first sound? To say it smoothly, like talking. So I might say, well done, you read that sentence really well. Can you go back and put it together and say it smoothly, like talking? And I might demonstrate that to them. Then the next three are very similar, and these are ones that I use lots and lots in school. They're very good prompts for helping children to think about what they said and whether it was correct or not. So the first one, you repeat back to them what they have just read to you. So you might say to them, oh, you said, let me just find an example. You said, look, can my car? Look, can my car? Did that make sense? And you're encouraging them to think about their reading. Did it make sense? And then they need to look back and see if they can correct it. They might say something that doesn't quite sound right. So it might be relating to the grammar of the sentence. So they may say something like, Sam runned down the hill. And I would say to them, oh, you said Sam runned down the hill. Did that sound right? Do we say it that way? No, we don't. We say Sam ran. So encouraging them to listen to themselves as they're reading. A very common one is where they say something and replace a word and they haven't noticed. So you could say, oh, you said, look in my box. Did that look right? Because maybe it said, look in my car. So you want them to go back and you want them to check, did that look right? Look in my box. Did it look right? Oh no, look, that doesn't look right there. Have another go and see if you can make sure it looks right when you're reading. So it's all about getting children to monitor their reading and to think about whether it makes sense, whether it sounds right, and whether it looks right. And it needs to match. So if we can help children to monitor their reading in this way, they'll be really good readers. And then once they're confident enough not to need your help with asking them to point, and you want them to have a go at doing it without their finger, we say to them, oh, can you read it with your eyes and not your finger? So these are great prompts, ones we really recommend using. Reading books. Now, in the past, your child would have just brought home one reading book. Since the government has had a real push on phonics and phonic teaching, we have started asking children to bring home 2 reading books. They'll have one that is a phonetically decodable reading book. This means that the books contain words that should all or nearly all be words that you're able to sound out and say the sounds and blend them to make words. These are sounds that they will have already learnt in class, and we're just encouraging them to practice these sounds by reading them in a text at home. They won't be sounds that the children have not yet learnt in class. So they will bring home books from the same phase that they were learning in class, or the phase that they have already done and they've learned in class. They will bring home books from that phase. But we also like them to bring home a reading book that contains some of the tricky words and some of the words which they need to just know, as well as those words that they sound out. So these books will contain both. Some children prefer reading the phonics books, some people prefer reading the other books. Totally up to your child. We try and encourage them in school to read both. So one week they might practice reading the phonetically decodable book to the teacher. Then the next week they might try and read the other book to the teacher. And we try and to rotate it like that and give them a good balanced mixture of phonetically decodable and books with tricky words. Recording reading. You'll have a reading record or a reading log. We have lots of children in school already have a yellow reading log. We bought special ones last year for reception children, the one on the right. And the great thing about these is that in the middle there are some charts showing the all the sounds, and they give you an example of how you would say that sound in a word, because they have a picture to show you the word. And you could then practice those with your child and tick them off as you go to help you know which ones your child confidently knows. So they are great, and they're really lovely reading records. They did cost a little bit more money than the other reading records, but we think it'd be really valuable for you to have these. And there's also a few other pages in the middle that are really useful, giving you some help on how to help reading. If you can record when your child reads inside these every day, that would be fantastic. I would aim to do it every day. If you don't manage to read every day, don't worry, but I would aim to try and do it every day and might make it part of your routine. If you could just pop the date, the page or book and the book title in here and make a comment if you like as well, that would be fantastic. If you can put your name too, then we know who they've read to. It's good for us to see how often children are reading and who they're reading with, and we can talk about their reading at home with them. It also acts as some evidence for any other visitors coming into school, how much reading we are doing with our children in school and at home. So they're a great way to show exactly what's going on, a diary as such of your child's reading. Please make sure they've got these in their bag with their books every day, because obviously different people writing them too. At the bottom of your reading records, there are some spaces to write the tricky words that your children need to practice, and maybe some of the sounds. These are only in those new ones we have bought, and hopefully this will also be useful. Finally, just a little bit about reading progress. Obviously, children move at different rates. Children make different amounts of progress. We have a guide of where we would like children to be, just because we have to think, where would children need to be ready for their SATs in year 2? So where would that mean we would like them to be at the end of year 1? So where would that mean they need to finish at the end of reception? So that we have an idea of our expectations, and we know then if children are on track or not. So there are some small steps that they need to make in reception so that we know that they will be on track. We like them to try and reach a level 6 or 7 by the end of the reception year. Now, again, like I said before, that's an average amount of progress. Some children will be higher book level than that. Some children will be on a lower book level than that. Sometimes it depends on their age and how ready they are. Some children are reading before they come to school, so it can be very different for each child. But we have to try and think, where do we need children to be, and who needs a bit extra help, or who is flying along, and we have to think about their progress and discuss their progress. So in term 1, they're learning their phonics and their tricky words. Oh, just go back. In term 2, we'd like them to be reading around a level 2. In term 4, we hope they're reading around a level 4. And by the end of the year, we would really like them to be reading around a level 6 or 7. The teachers will be assessing them very often, frequently, a couple of times a term at least. So we will constantly be thinking, are they ready to move up to the next level? So that's just a little bit about the progress that children make. Again, don't worry, as long as your child is making some progress, that's the most important thing. We don't want to be too concerned about the actual levels, but it's just thinking about where your child is at, and is your child moving up at a steady rate. In January and February, hopefully, we invite parents in to come and watch one of our reading assistants do a session with the children. And what they do is they read with your child, and you can come and watch and pick up on some of the skills they use, how they prompt the child. So you can come and watch that hopefully in school. If that's not possible, maybe we'll see if we can record a session so that you can see a session in progress. But that's a bit about reading progress. Just finally, thinking about the importance of parent support. Some people think because children are in school, they're learning to read in school every day, and that they don't really feel that they need to do much at home. In school, sometimes children are looking at the phonics, sometimes children are working on the tricky words, but it might not be that every day they sit down with a book and read, pulling all those skills together. So your role as parents partly is to help us help the children practice those skills that we have been teaching them in school. And in school, we might be teaching them those skills individually some days, other days we might be reading and pulling it all together. The pictures are my examples of how this might look if I was teaching you something in a similar way. So if I was teaching you how to cook, and on Mondays we only did chopping, and on Tuesdays we were learning how to boil something, and on Wednesdays we only did chopping, and on Thursdays we only taught you how to mix something. On Fridays we did some more chopping, and maybe once in that week you got to cook something all the way to the end, doing the chopping, the boiling, the mixing. You can kind of see how teaching skills can be very different to reading, because reading is bringing all those skills together. So if you can practice reading just for 10 minutes each day, it can have a huge impact, because the children who read at home tend to be the better readers. They tend to get more practice, and they tend to become more fluent. Often the children who need some more support are children who haven't practiced their reading at home. So just 10 minutes, making it a fun, enjoyable time can really, really help. So if you can take away just one thing from this meeting, I would really, really like you to think about just trying to make time to do that little bit of reading every day. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that you'll be able to come into school very soon and maybe see some reading in action. But until then, I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like to if you'd like some more help, then please do email the school, and I will see if I can get any frequently asked questions, if I could put the answers together in a sheet and send out to you all. But I hope that's been really helpful, and thank you very much.